This podcast is brought to you by American Fiction. Nominated for 5 Critics' Choice Awards, including Jeffrey Wright for Best Actor, Sterling K. Brown Best Supporting Actor, Cord Jefferson for Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Picture. And Hornaday of the Washington Post called American Fiction the best picture of the year. Now playing in select theaters. For your consideration in all categories, including Best Picture.
Hello, listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is episode 214 of the AwardsWatch Podcast. I'm your executive editor, Ryan McQuade. Joining me is Erik Anderson, our editor-in-chief.
Hello, live in person. Let's go.
Yeah, this is going to be great. We're recording a little bit after the Golden Globes, the 2023 Golden Globes, 2024 Golden Globes, announced their winners tonight. And it's the first major telecast of the award season, and it was a really interesting night. A lot of jokes that didn't land, and a lot of winners that we liked, a lot of winners that are going to start providing some clarity maybe, or maybe not, into the award season. It just depends on how far you think the Globes and their wins are going to translate. But first of all, Erik and I watched the ceremony on and off together throughout most of the night. So, Erik, I'm curious from your standpoint what you thought. Well, let's just say the ceremony first before we get into the host and the winners. So, the ceremony, what'd you think?
The ceremony itself, the Globes have been sort of on this comeback trail for a couple of years after a significant number of all of their controversies and the skeletons in their closet coming back to haunt them. And, they're trying to make a lot of changes. The Hollywood Foreign Press Association doesn't exist anymore, even though a few winners still acknowledge them. They have 300 voters now, up from the 90 that they've had for decades and decades. So they are making this dramatic effort to rehabilitate their persona. And so I think we were going to look at tonight's winners and see if we could see something in there. I'm not sure that we did exactly, if we saw some dramatic differences, especially because a lot of the winners were very kind of falling in line with either what we thought they were going to be, or on the TV side, very, very limited in any type of wins. It was. I think it was a good ceremony outside of the host, because the winners and the presenters really took over what the host was lacking and just kind of ran the show themselves.
Yeah, our host was comedian Joe Coy, and from his own words, he was hired 10 days before the ceremony started, which that's a problem within itself, I think, by the Golden Globes organization. But one of the worst monologues we've ever seen. It's hard to top the bad monologue that Gerard Carmichael did last year, but he sure went for it, and he succeeded. I mean, that room turned on him pretty quick, and there was a pretty distasteful Barbie joke, and a cringeworthy joke, at least, about Robert De Niro being a new father. And there was just a lot of... And then also the worst part of it was throwing his writers under the bus. His writers that put together these jokes, of which jokes landed and which ones didn't, and whatever. It doesn't matter about which ones landed and which ones didn't, because it's still unprofessional to kind of do that about your own writers, which a writer's room like that can get put together pretty quickly, and it could be a bunch of people that haven't worked together in a while. And so it just felt very off, but he was sidelined for the rest of the ceremony, it felt like, which, thank God. he was. But did you have any thoughts outside of my own about Coy's performance tonight?
I think hosting any award ceremony is going to be really difficult, but I think at the beginning, if you don't have a relationship with the industry and with some of the people that are there, I think that's part of the reason why your jokes can come off more just ugly and mean-spirited rather than kind of nudging and funny and knowing. It's sort of why Tina Fey and Amy Poehler were so popular, because they worked with everybody. Their humor was really smart as well as really pointed. And then on the other side, you have somebody like Ricky Gervais, who is a brutal roaster, but at the same time, there's a certain kind of sadomasochistic quality that you can get from being roasted really quite so acutely. And that's something that Coy just did not have in any way. And so most of his jokes either fell really flat, or they were so just kind of like ugly funny and not mean funny. Yeah, so it just didn't really work.
Yeah, and when it falls flat, then the room doesn't start off well. But then, of course, the winners started happening, both television and film. I think let's start with television first, because that's, I think, more of an easier path to talk about rather than when we get into the film side of things and all the different possibilities that are going to happen there, since we're going to be talking about that for the next 2.5 months or so. Because the Emmys are a week from today, the time of this is being released. The Emmys are going to maybe look a little bit like possibly the Golden Globes. Definitely a lot of Succession for sure, which Succession walked away with 4 awards on the night, which was Best Drama, Best Actor for Kieran Culkin, which was a bit of a surprise over Jeremy Strong, and then it won Supporting Actor for Matthew McFadden, and then Sarah Snook won Best Actress in a Drama as well. But then also over on the comedy side, The Bear won 3, if I'm not mistaken, which was Best Actor, Best Actress for Jeremy Allen White and Ayo Edebiri, and then, of course, the Best Comedy Series. And then over on the Limited Series and Anthology Series, it was Beef, winning both Actor and Actress, and then Limited Series Anthology. So your kind of overall thoughts on these unprecedented sweeps by the Globes almost felt like reminiscent of the Emmys during the strike, right, a couple of years ago, where Schitt's Creek and The Crown and everything sort of swept through there, Mayor of Easttown. So what did you think of these unprecedented sweeps, and do you think that we're going to see a preview of that in a week's time at the Emmys?
Well, considering that the Globes have, I think, more categories for TV, not a lot more, but they have a good amount. It's only 4 shows won anything, and 3 of them won almost everything. Elizabeth Debicki won Supporting Actress for The Crown, and was the only show that won anything outside of The Bear, Beef, and Succession. So it was unprecedented in the sense that one show won series and both lead wins for each section, limited, drama, and comedy. And so it did give this sort of feeling of unadventurousness with the voting. And I think sometimes we get a little annoyed when it feels like there is a rubber stamping, or when something does sweep. Sweeps are very strange things, because they can either give off the vibe of incredible and deep passion, or absolute and total boredom and apathy. And if you're an outsider looking at it, it usually feels more like the latter than the former. But at the same time, these are all extremely respected shows and performances, so it's hard to argue. You may want something else to win, but it's hard to argue when the shows and performances have been worthy elsewhere and are going to be after tonight.
Yeah, I mean, Beef is probably the most celebrated limited series across the board. This was the celebration or wins for The Bear season 2, as the Emmys will be for season 1, correct?
Yeah, there's nothing weird or awkward or crazy or confusing about that whatsoever.
Try to keep that on track. And then, of course, this will ultimately culminate for the final run for Succession here at the Globes, but then also the final run for it at the Emmys as well. So this is part of the grand sort of farewell tour the next week, and then it'll lead into SAG later, which it should probably dominate at SAG as well. We should anticipate that. I wasn't surprised by them. I mean, The Bear was sort of it premiered right before the strike. It was the show that's fresh on the mind, and Succession obviously is Succession, and Beef has done really well for itself too. So I'm not surprised by any of this. I would like variety, though. On the night of the Creative Arts Emmys, which was the night before, Succession did not do actually really well at all. It did not win a single award, including for everyone online very angry that Nicholas Britell didn't win an Emmy for his wonderful work on Succession. But The White Lotus and The Last of Us did really well. But we expect, obviously, in a week's time at the telecast, you would expect those Succession to do very well, I would assume, right?
Yes, but we're also going to see The White Lotus be competing in drama series versus limited series. So I think the Emmys are going to maybe be a little bit more interesting. But yeah, I don't think the wins at the Globes for those 3 shows came as a surprise at all. They're all hot button and buzzy shows, and the Globes really like that. And yeah, they're great wins too.
No, they are great wins, but we also, in this weird timeline as well, last year's Globes was able to celebrate The White Lotus season 2, which is going up against Succession season 4. It's all complicated, folks. I don't know what to tell you. All right, it's a lot of weird shit. But the Emmys will be next week. We'll talk about that when that happens on the show. But we have to get into these film awards, and it was a big night. If you're a fan of a movie that came out this summer that dominated the box office, and no, I'm not talking about Barbie. I'm talking about it was a big night for Oppenheimer. 5 Golden Globe wins, including Best Drama, Best Director, Best Score for Ludwig Göransson, Best Actor for Cillian Murphy, and Best Supporting Actor for Robert Downey Jr. Best Actress in a Drama went to Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon, and Best Actor in a Comedy went to Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers. Best Actress in a Comedy went to also the film that won Best Comedy, which was Poor Things, and that was Emma Stone who won that. And Supporting Actress was Divine Joy Randolph, continuing her dominance in the Supporting Actress from the critics' wins to the telecast. And Best Screenplay, though, was a bit of a shock. It was not any of the frontrunners. It was actually Anatomy of a Fall, which also went on to win Best non-English language film. Best Animated Film was also a little bit of an upset, I would say, in that The Boy and the Heron won over Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. But Barbie did go away with 2 wins, 1 real, 1 fake. They went with Best Original Song for Billie Eilish, which was to be expected. That is the song that is the front runner to win the Oscar. But then, of course, the Box Office Cinematic Achievement Award, which we should also note. We didn't say this, but there was a television, I guess, award that was the equivalent of this, which was the best stand-up for a television special or whatever, and that went to Ricky Gervais, who wasn't there. Which, good job, Globes. They got rid of the Cecil DeMille Award and the Carol Burnett Award to give a Box Office Achievement Award and a Stand-Up Comedian Award, and half of those recipients did not show up for it. Erik, let's talk about these wins first, and let's just talk about what you think of the night and what these wins mean. That's a big night for Oppenheimer. It's a little bit less for a movie like Barbie that was leading the night with 8 nominations, right? And and losing to Poor Things, which so let's start from Oppenheimer's perspective. I think we can clearly say that we have a front runner, and people will go online like they already have tonight, and they will talk about, oh, well, it's a front runner now, but it may not be all the way to the Oscars. We've seen this before with the Golden Globes. Where's your perspective on it after tonight? Is this a big sign of strength going forward, and do you think that they can carry the momentum, or is this maybe just a Globes fluke and then it doesn't go anywhere, or is it just still wait and see, we got the guilds?
Well, you're presenting all the scenarios that every person's going to use to justify the narrative that they want to do based on, whatever their predictions are or the film that they like or whatever it might be. The Globes are the first, so they can establish things or not. I think Oppenheimer winning director and picture, no surprise that those were definitely going to happen. I think there was more possibly up in the air for actor and supporting actor. I think score was pretty solid for Oppenheimer before tonight. So I think they're great wins and they're great for it. It is the first. I don't discount it and I don't add extra to it really right now. I think it's fantastic. It's really good for Downey, I think, because I do think the Globes could have gone a little more offside a little bit, and it could have been Ryan Gosling or it could have been Charles Melton, but they went with the prevailing critics' choice right now. They also did with Cillian Murphy. He is the prevailing critics' choice winner right now, and it's again interesting looking at the expanded lineup of voters and where they went. You almost would have expected with that Anatomy of a Fall win for screenplay that Sandra Hüller might have maybe had a better chance to win actress than we had thought of. That screenplay win was very surprising in the context of everything else that it was with. A great win, a really fun win. But I'm not sure I don't know if it changes or cements anything. Again, we're right at the beginning. I think it's great for Oppenheimer because it does establish a beginning point. For Barbie, I don't know. It lost to Poor Things. Was that, the more international voters speaking in favor of that versus Barbie? Possibly. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think Gladstone winning is fantastic. I do really feel this is her jumping off point. This is where it starts. I think Da'Vine Joy Randolph already put herself in incredibly historic territory after winning National Board of Review, New York, Los Angeles, and National Society of Film Critics for supporting actress. She's one of only 5 actresses to ever do that in history. And now she has the Golden Globe too. They could have gone somewhere slightly different, but they did not. They went with the absolute clear front runner. So maybe the Globes really are just giving a little bit of Critics' Choice realness right now and going with real front runners.
Yeah, front runners, but then also too, this is when a group gets more voters into their group, a consensus then starts to grow. And the group that now makes up the Golden Globe critics, not the Hollywood Critics Association, or Hollywood Foreign Press, I'm sorry, they were made up of 90 critics. They are now of an organization of 300. So they have tripled in size. And I think that could lead to more consensus and maybe safer picks is the right way to maybe say it, than more wild, out there, outlandish, crazy picks that we know the Globes to be. But over the last couple of years, they have had pretty interesting and really good wins. I mean, last year they did spread the wealth. I mean, everyone is quick to jump on that Everything Everywhere All at Once did not win comedy or musical drama, but they still did reward Michelle Yeoh, and they still did reward Ki Kwan, and were really the launching points for those televised events to be able to carry those all the way forward. And I do think that the Globes are great because they're the first chance for the voters out there of the Academy and the guilds to see these above the line people give speeches. And as long as you don't have terrible speeches, it's good. And I think everybody pretty much gave a really good speech tonight. I think of the speeches that I saw, there's a couple I didn't see on the television side because I was in and out of the room. But on the film side, I thought Christopher Nolan's speech was an incredible speech, very introspective and retrospective of that. This is a director that has not been celebrated, and we've seen people talk about, oh, Nolan should get it, or Gerwig, or this, or Scorsese, or whoever, because it really feels like they are the three giant contenders in Killers, Barbie, and Oppenheimer, though with Poor Things maybe on the outside looking in, maybe a little bit more now tonight than before. But this is a guy that's been in the business for like 25 years, 30 years, and hasn't been celebrated by the industry. And he talked about how the last time he was on the Golden Globe stage, holding a trophy in his hand, he was accepting it for the late, great Heath Ledger. And how emotional that was for him tonight. It was a very different Christopher Nolan than you've seen before. And I do think that it starts showing you, based off of the people in the room, these are going to be the same voters and stuff, you can get the feel that there is a lot of sentiment behind this film. There is a lot of sentiment behind movies like Barbie and Poor Things and The Holdovers. Anatomy of a Fall winning this tonight was huge for that movie because that original screenplay category is wide open, because since the last time we had a show, they moved Barbie to adapted screenplay, and everybody in their goddamn minds started losing the fact of what actually is an adapted screenplay over an original screenplay, but that's another episode for another time. But the room showed, based off of the winners, the amount of acclaim and respect, even though, yes, everybody got standing ovations. There was a lot of love for, like you're saying, Lily Gladstone, who feels like this is her moment and that it feels like that this is her time. Da'Vine Joy Randolph continuously carrying over all of those wins over now to the telecast, which I expect her to carry that over to Critics' Choice as well. Robert Downey Jr., I mean, just feels like this could be his moment to celebrate him. I don't think it's over, because I think Ryan Gosling is going to play very strong, potentially at Critics' Choice, maybe even at SAG. So it was a big win, like you said, for Downey. But for Cillian Murphy to win this also over Bradley Cooper on the televised event, and it's a big win for him. And I think that some of these wins are a little telling, but also too, you're right. This is the first of these awards, and it also still kind of gives a little bit like, a couple of years ago when we were having that great Best Actress race of 2018, Erik, and Glenn Close and Lady Gaga got to make speeches that night, because Lady Gaga got the song and Glenn Close, but Olivia Colman got to speak as well, because she won Comedy Actress, and she was always making speeches. And even though, yes, that award was silly, the cinematic box office achievements, Greta Gerwig still got to go up there, and she made a hell of a speech, a fun speech. People got to celebrate and talk about Barbie, so it's not like it wasn't still there. You know what I mean? So I think that it's still even, but I do think Oppenheimer has pulled ahead, And I don't know if it's like other frontrunners. It's such a respected and celebrated film and acclaimed, and people have seen it so many times that I think you still have to wait for the guilds to figure out. But it was a very, very impressive night for it. I mean, like The Boy and the Heron winning, that was kind of a shock too, wouldn't you say?
I mean, it was a shock. It was certainly, in contention with Spider-Man, and there was a lot of wonderful historic value to a lot of the wins tonight. Anatomy's screenplay win was a first time ever for a non-English language film. The Boy and the Heron's win was historical within the Globes as the first traditionally animated film to win, as well as the first non-English language animated film to win. And when you think about an organization that is entirely comprised of international, not English language as a first language voters, for this to be the first one to win that's great context within what this group is and what they were and what they hope to be. But I do want to say one thing about what you said a bit ago about a larger group having more consensus. I would disagree with that because the original group of 90 were all LA based, and they all had to watch things together at specific screenings. So their interactions were always and conversations were always going to be together with each other in person, which definitely would create a little more consensus. And this new group of 300 are quite literally around the world who do not have direct in-person interactions. So I would have thought the wealth spreading would have been maybe a little bit more evident tonight than in the past. But I mean, to speak again to the strength of Oppenheimer and certain elements of it, Robert Downey Jr., his speech was very self-effacing and full of, this is just, the most improved award for me. So he's kind of prepared, I think, and ready for this award season. I think he's ready to give a lot of speeches. I think they're going to kind of be in the same vein as what he gave tonight with the Globes. And also, to your point, speeches can be incredibly intoxicating and really convincing for voters, whether they're funny, whether they are impactful. I think people are going to want to hear more speeches from Lily Gladstone. I think they're going to want to hear more from Greta Gerwig. I think they're going to want to hear more from Christopher Nolan, because for Nolan, like he said in his own speech, he doesn't give a lot of award speeches because he does not win a lot of awards. I think for Gerwig, there is sort of the same connection to somebody like Guillermo del Toro, who loves movies so much, talks about them all the time, and you can feel it every time they talk about anything that they talk about. And that means a lot to voters. Unlike award show hosts who hate movies, voters really like to vote for people who like movies. And that is going to mean a lot for somebody like Gerwig, for somebody like Nolan. And weirdly, I don't know why I'm sort of thinking about this now, but I think the success of Oppenheimer, from what it was and the risk that it was to becoming a massive success, is weirdly similar to Titanic.
Yeah.
Where it took a really long time for James Cameron's credibility on the award side to be taken seriously because his box office side was always so strong. And that absolutely has been the case for Christopher Nolan. The Oscars took so long to get on his side and even nominate him for Best Director. And I think something like Oppenheimer was such a huge risk and then ended up making 10 times more money than I think most people thought that it was going to make. And I do think that there will be a respect and acknowledgement of that.
Yeah, it's very, like, I think the James Cameron comparison is very correct, because James Cameron was able to win for Titanic, and he's been able to now get $1 billion check, essentially, or more, to create a cinematic universe or whatever he wants. I think also the Steven Spielberg comparison, because for a long time Spielberg dabbled in genre, and he was nominated for sure, but did he win? No. It took him to make a drama, a more straightforward drama, serious drama. That did make a lot of money. It was like, I think, like the second biggest film, the box office or whatever. And he had also Jurassic Park that year with it too. So he owned that year. And then I've been telling you a lot, like, it just feels like, you talk about Spielberg, when Spielberg talked to Tarantino about Robert Zemeckis, another guy that dabbled a lot in genre and finally made something that audiences connected with. It was the number one film at the box office in Forrest Gump. And it had the right star, it had the right director, it was the right time. And it does feel like Nolan's time. It has felt like that for the longest time. And I think the success of Oppenheimer, its continued success, because it's been re-released and re-released and re-released, its continued success is only accredited to a generational director. And that's what Nolan is. And we've talked about that on the podcast and everything. But to your credit as well also, and I will say this, Greta Gerwig is someone that is just like Nolan. She is a massive fan of the cinematic experience. The one of the highlights of AFI this year, from myself and Sophia and yourself, was to see a couple of the curated films that she handpicked, selected, that were not only inspirations to Barbie, but also massive cinematic movies that moved and shaped her, that she saw on the big screen. Pee-wee's Big Adventure, All That Jazz, A Matter of Life and Death, American Paris. These wonderful films, Wings of Desire. And so she's a massive fan of the form. So it's great to see the different generations in this, because we all know Martin Scorsese is definitely like that. He's the champion of all champions when it comes to the art form. But these two are the new champions of that. And they aren't playing this, and I think this is the most important thing that our listeners and everybody else out there should listen to. They're not in competition. They're not angry at one another. They're not trying to build it like the internet wants it to build it. Because when Greta was coming in her first Oscar campaign for Lady Bird, that was when Dunkirk was out. And if you go back to the videos and everything, they've met each other. They know each other. They're very friendly with one another. They've talked and joked a lot throughout this process already. And they're going to be around each other throughout this entire experience. You build those experiences together. They clearly are part of this big movement. And you're right. I mean, Oppenheimer was more of like, I know we joked about it here on the podcast as Floppenheimer and things of that nature, but we more expected Barbie to do well, because that seemed like the more accessible film for audiences. An R-rated 3-hour biopic in the middle of summer? Get the hell out of here. That would, I mean, it's like I said, who would have thought that would have made $950 million? Who would have thought it would have gotten to this point to win 5 Golden Globes and be a front runner? But it is, and that's a big achievement. And I know a lot of our friends in the industry were big on trying to push Top Gun Maverick last year into happening. And that was never going to happen, because that movie was still not taken seriously enough by the Academy to say, this is a movie we think should win Best Picture. And I don't know if that is that extent or that excuse will be used for Barbie, but I do not think you can use that excuse for Oppenheimer, because this is the type of movie they like to see. It's traditional in the way it's picked, but it's also such an achievement on every single stretch. Maybe a couple performances that Erik doesn't like, but definitely it's on the technical level. You cannot deny its mastery. And yes, I do agree with you. Lily Gladstone and her speech tonight. We were able to, and lucky enough to see her at a party the night before the Globes and everything. And it just feels like she has that presence of, this is her moment, the importance that this award would mean. in the historical significance of it all. It's not lost on her, but she's still able to talk about that, but then also make it personal to her. And I thought that that was really a really beautiful, special moment tonight. And I think also to Emma Stone being the total opposite of that, where she's the producer of that film, and she has a lot of love for this project, and you can clearly see that there. And so, I don't know. We could talk about Best Actress a little bit, real quick. I mean, I agree with you. I think this is Lily out front, and I think I hate saying things are. I don't want to say things are locked, but if she feels like a sweeper, she feels like somebody that could go the whole way. Stone's definitely right there. How do you see Best Actress right now? Is it just them two?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it is a Stone versus Stone race, as the winners tonight kind of showed. I've been on Lily Gladstone as a front runner train for a little while, but we're in the pre-nomination stage. The entire game changes after nominations. Emma Stone is incredibly personable and funny and fantastic, and I think Gladstone is also too. But she will be a new face for so many people. But she's eager to do it. It takes a lot of energy to, do a campaign and to really be at this for months and meet hundreds and hundreds of people for 10 seconds at a time or 5 minutes at a time. It's physically, emotionally exhausting. I feel like she is really kind of into it, not in the awards race element of it, but just in talking to people and hearing from people. So I think that's going to it's going to do a lot. It does a lot for voters. It does a lot for people that want somebody or something to win. As we kind of always say, passion will always outride respect almost every single time. That's why you see things get a dozen nominations and not a whole lot of wins or none at all. That's a part of it. I think she will garner respect and passion in a way that will be more than most of her competitors, which would be, Emma Stone and Sandra Hüller would be her biggest competitors.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I think it is between those two, like you're mentioning, and yeah, I was agreeing. I thought that when the Anatomy wins started happening, I think maybe the old guard would have probably gone for Sandra, but I don't know. It just, when I meant consensus earlier, I guess the consensus with all the other groups that we've seen so far, because if you look at the tally boards of wins, nominations, and everything, Barbie and Oppenheimer are definitely up there. But if you look at the wins, it is an overwhelmingly Oppenheimer favorite win tallies right now in terms of overall wins in every category, especially in picture. And yes, some of those groups, unless I'm misspoken about that, Eric's looking up the. We're looking at him live just right now, but if I'm not mistaken, like Oppenheimer is in the triple digits already in terms of wins. But he's looking at it live, folks. Anyway, I'll keep bantering while he's going. But yeah, I thought Sandra Hüller might have won that. I mean, obviously, Margot losing in a straight up battle with Emma in that category is not great either. A little bit of a disappointment tonight in that Maestro. And May December went home empty-handed, so Carey Mulligan losing in that category. Obviously, Bradley Cooper losing, but then, yeah, May December losing all of its nominations, including drama. American Fiction was another film tonight that walked home empty-handed, a movie that had a ton of momentum. It feels like that movie is slowly fading away in terms of its momentum from the festival circuit. while the Holdovers did win those two. It felt like right after Giamatti won that, it felt like a Holdovers win was coming until Poor Things that came in. Eric, do you have updated numbers on it, or are you looking at things?
Well, I mean, I just wanted to say that, I mean, yes, Christopher Nolan, from the critics' win standpoint, is the far, far, far out frontrunner. But in the Best Picture, Killers of the Flower Moon and Oppenheimer are really quite even, surprisingly. And I think the thing that's a little surprising about that is that Scorsese has not matched with the Killers' wins in Best Picture, which is kind of...
What do you mean, director?
Yeah, no, yes, in director. The spread is very different in director than it is in picture for those two films. And yeah, then you get into actor Cillian Murphy, absolutely just started quietly and then laid waste.
Yes.
Lily Gladstone, double digits above Emma Stone now. Same goes for Robert Downey Jr. Started kind of quietly, and as regionals kicked in, blew up. Davine Joy Randolph, from the beginning, has been absolutely the barn-burning frontrunner.
There was a potential at a certain point she was winning everything at one point.
Yeah, she had everything until Rachel McAdams kind of tied her at LA and got a few on her own, which I know has given a lot of like hope for people that want her to get in, and bless their hearts, and I hope that happens for them. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe. I don't know.
I think the most interesting thing out of her tonight, but overall Oppenheimer is dominating if you add up every category together, for sure, which then leads to potentially a giant Oscar night for it on the horizon, even bigger, which is insane, isn't it? An even bigger night than we had last year, because Everything Everywhere All at Once won, was it seven last year? There's a potential of a double-digit Oppenheimer night of winning if it wins picture, director, adapted screenplay, actor, supporting actor, cinematography, editing. What else would it need to win? Sound, score, and one more somewhere in there. It's unlikely, but it could happen. Nine's on the board as a possibility. It probably will not happen just because of the era and everything, but it's in play, and that's something you have to keep in consider as well. That would be unprecedented. We haven't had that many wins in a long, long time, and it's not that other films can't come in there and win as well. But I think what's also interesting tonight, The Anatomy of a Fall win in screenplay, and with now the change of Barbie, that original screenplay category is an absolute open race. And it's going to be that way, Eric, until the night of the Oscars, because WGA is not going to play a factor, because all that happens after the Oscars. Barbie was submitted in an original screenplay for BAFTA, and then all these critics groups have put it into original screenplay for those wins as well. Can you kind of tell us what your thoughts are on this category? Because it could be Holdovers, it could be Past Lives, it definitely now could be Anatomy of a Fall, if the Academy seems to go for this movie, which is the Palme d'Or winner and has had a ton of momentum for Neon.
I love the screenplay category race right now because it is kind of so all over the place. I do think that Barbie's move from original to adapted is a great help for something like The Holdovers, which is already doing very well critically, whether it's groups that do only original or groups that do screenplay as a single category. It's the leader there. So I think it's a great benefit to the Holdovers, more so than past lives. I think the Barbie scenario in Adapted is a really complicated one because that puts it up with Oppenheimer and Poor Things, which would be the absolute two front runners there. And if you want to talk about spreading the wealth, then there is, again, we are in a pre-nomination scenario, and this is like, we're talking way past Golden Globes now. This was a Golden Globes podcast, and we're talking way past that. But there's a scenario in which Barbie could still win Adapted as a slightly conciliatory prize that they don't have to give to Oppenheimer. Although Oppenheimer as an adaptation is a pretty complicated one. The same way that Killers of the Flower Moon is a complicated adaptation from its original source. If you consider Barbie an adapted screenplay, well, my best to you if you do. But if you do, and a totally original concept of an adaptation. So I think we're looking at an adapted screenplay category that is pretty rich overall, but there's a possibility for it. I'm maybe.
It has been adapted. I've been saying it from the beginning. But on this podcast, thank you very much. Anyway, I'm just saying the facts. But anyway, no, I do agree with you. I mean, they are all three of them, and Poor Things, too. That's a monumental, and even talk about other contenders. I mean, it's such a great year for adapted screenplay, with All of Us Strangers, American Fiction, Zone of Interest. These are all complicated texts or
All of
creation.
Us Strangers.
He's just gonna want to scream All of Us Strangers until it gets that nomination.
That's an adapted screenplay.
Yes. But I do think it will be interesting because, like, yes, they could throw it that Oscar and say, "Here you go, Barbie. This is for you. You know, congratulations. This is this and original song, and maybe costumes or production design is your night." And 3 or 4 wins wouldn't be bad. Greta Gerwig finally gets to win an Oscar, even though she already should have 1 or 2 of them. Taika Waititi has her Oscar. And anyway, I think that there is also potential of them just going down the line, down the ballot. We all thought, oh, well, last year, maybe Everything Everywhere All at Once wins, just director and picture, and then Banshees or something else could win that category, and that didn't go that way. And it doesn't usually go that way sometimes, especially if you have a powerhouse like that in that category. So we'll see when it comes to that. But right now, it's still up in the air. Oppenheimer does seem to have pushed his way forward a little bit more, even after its already impressive performance with the critical circuit so far. I do think, though, as we get closer to the guilds, with SAG coming up this week and the Directors Guild of America nominations, I do expect Oppenheimer, Barbie, and Killers and Poor Things to do well at all 3 of those, or both of those showings, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
All right. Any final thoughts, Erik Anderson, before we wrap this baby up?
Joe Coy will never host a show again.
They should get you to host one of these years. I think you do a great job. You talk a lot of smack in front of people. That would be great.
I think people would hate me so much, but I would absolutely do it.
More than they already do?
Way more.
Erik, can you tell everybody where they can find you and all of our work on the internet?
Well, hopefully if you are listening to this, you already come and read everything at AwardsWatch.com and subscribe to the newsletter, listen to the podcast, and hopefully like or at least want to fight about all of the work that we do.
All right. You can find him also on Twitter at awards_watch. since he doesn't know how to just complete and just figure out how to find them on the internet, you dodo bird. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find all my work here at AwardsWatch.com. If you like podcasts, we also have the Director Watch Podcast. We are starting a new series this week over the films of William Friedkin, and our first film on the docket will be The Boys in the Band with our very own Josh Parham. It was a really great episode. I hope you all listen to that. If you also like everything that we do, you can sign up for our Awards Watch newsletter. And Erik already said it, but I'm just going to say it again because sometimes he forgets, to help out, the needy there. Erik puts a lot of great work into that. It was released on Wednesday and on Friday. It has all of our reviews, interviews, and podcasts that we do, and all the news, and all the great critics wins and everything to keep you up to date as those are breaking throughout the season. Next week, we will have a recap of Critics' Choice and the SAG nominations and everything in between. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.